Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as always, is your other co-host, John. John, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, man. I had an awesome weekend. The weather this week was just fantastic. It was perfect for me. So I had a great weekend. A buddy of mine came down, built a fire pit in the backyard. So
Ooh,
now,
nice.
oh yeah, man, I wanted to get that done and ready just in time for fall. So it's got plenty of time now. And then, be able to watch games all day. And then at the end of the night, maybe barbecue a little bit and then sit out by the fire. It's just a perfect college football Saturday. I can't wait,
Yeah,
man.
that sounds glorious. So did you try out the fire pit and see how it worked?
I was going to, tonight, but like I want to it just doesn't feel like I'm ready for it quite yet. It's still August. It's a
Sure.
little warmer than I'd like it to be. Not that it's super warm right now outside, but I'm gonna give it some time. I wanna make sure everything else settles first. I know we put a bunch of sand and all. I mean, it's a whole to do, but it looks good. Everything's standing up good so far. So, yeah, man. It's a first time ever doing that, so that was fun. Well, my buddy works for a brick and landscaping company, so at least he knew what he was doing. So
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool
good,
when
man.
you've got a guy. I love
you've got
you've got your list of guys. You have your backyard guy.
Well, living in New Jersey for a long time, everybody's got a guy. I got a guy for that. So now, I'm getting that all back here now, just in Minnesota. So
right on.
It's great. How about you?
Oh man, it's been great. I got to the lake for a few days, which I've only been able to get up there a few times this summer because I've been pretty busy. But it was not as hot as it's been. I will say that. So of course, when I finally get to the lake after it's been like 90 and humid, feeling like it's the mid 90s, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to the lake. It's gonna be so hot. It's gonna be so good. And then I get to the lake and it's like 65 and cloudy. So not great. It did get better this weekend. Yeah. So for Saturday and Sunday, it was pretty nice. It got into the 70s at least. And but it was great. It's always good to be at the lake. Did a bunch of water skiing.
Oh, nice.
Made a big fire, under the stars kind of thing. So it was good. It's always good to get to the lake country.
Dude, it's the best, man. I mean, I miss it. I can't wait to get up there. I'm trying to make a little trip, plan for a trip up this fall when things get a little less busy. I mean, I know we're going to be busy with this and the pod and whatnot, but we're gonna finagle a few days in there to get up there. It'll be great, especially in the fall, man. Perfect.
Got to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, man. Good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad you got away and things calmed down a little bit for you for a while, and now you're back at it.
Exactly. Now we're back in the saddle. And we have 3 more Big Ten teams to review tonight.
I'm excited, man. This is going to be a good one.
Oh, this is going to be a fun one. So tonight we are doing Indiana, Illinois, and the team that when we talk about them, you can all call us homers, the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
John's rocking the apparel. For those of you who are audio only, wearing these Outback Bowl Champions t-shirt.
Yeah. I'm going to hold on to 2019, baby. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah, 11-2.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about it incessantly, actually. I'm going to keep reminding everybody. That's what I'm going to do. No,
Never let anybody forget.
I won't do that.
We won't do that today. We're talking about 2024.
That's right.
It's the only year we're talking about today.
Exactly.
But before we get into those previews, John, it's getting a little testy in Iowa City.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on. And I'm hearing a lot from Iowa fans. Really, I'm seeing like polls. I'm seeing a lot of questions about what about the quarterback, and I'm not sure. Even their beat writers, are out there, causing some concern for the fan base, and we're not so sure about Cade. I'm not sure about Cade McNamara. I think they have a pretty solid backup with Brendan Sullivan. And we've said that before. But there's a lot of question marks going into this year. Obviously, everybody knows that he's been hurt, dealt with that all last year, and it took him out for the season. And now, is that still an issue? I don't know. I've asked a couple Iowa fans, and they're arguing against that, and which frankly would make me even more nervous. It's is
So
it more?
let's give people some context, John.
Sure.
So it's been reported Iowa had a scrimmage over the weekend, and this was Cade McNamara's stat line throwing the football. 7 for 21 for 20 yards, 0 touchdowns, an interception on a pick 6, 1 sack, and 1 fumbled snap.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you keeping track at home, that's fewer than 1 yards per attempt. 7 for 21 for 20 yards. That is abysmal and not something you think of. Cade McNamara. This is a guy who won a Big Ten championship at Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, we have seen him be a really good Big Ten quarterback. So for him to perform like that in a scrimmage that's probably set up to have him look pretty good and for him to not look good is really concerning. And apparently, based on what we're reading, there are whispers that it hasn't just been this one scrimmage. It's not just one bad day, that maybe Cade's having a lot of problems.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that there could be some other issues going on as far as, where his mental state is. And after not playing for that long, you made this point earlier to me, that can cause some issues. You see that in other sports with other athletes. They come back after a major injury and just something's not the same, and it's very much a mental game, especially at that position. So I can only imagine where he's at. We'll see. Maybe he'll be able to get it together. It was just, this particular practice that we're, referencing was just maybe maybe it's just a one-off, or maybe it's just a bad week. Who knows? Maybe he'll get it back in time. There is still a little bit of time to get it together, but clearly, like we've discussed before, you don't bring in a starter from Northwestern to come and be a backup at another Big Ten program just for nothing. I mean, he was guaranteed to start at Northwestern this year so there's a little something going on.
Was he?
I mean,
because Northwestern, he was the backup last year.
Mm-hmm.
He played some when Ben Bryant was hurt and had pretty mixed results, if we're being honest. Like, he made some nice plays, but also threw a lot of picks and made some mistakes and things like that. Northwestern is going to like a dual threat quarterback kind of vibe this year. They brought in a new offensive coordinator to put that in. I don't think Brendan Sullivan was going to be the starter. I really don't. Maybe I'm wrong here, but it feels like Northwestern is stylistically going in a different direction from a drop back passer like a Brendan Sullivan.
Well, I mean, I thought maybe it was just because he was running for his life, but I thought he was a little bit more mobile last year. But maybe that. I'm
not saying he's not mobile, but there's mobile and there's dual threat, right?
Fair enough.
Like, there are guys who are mobile, but you don't want them running all the time. Like, I'm talking about guys who are true weapons with their legs.
Yeah. Well, I think, either way, it is interesting. I think the move, definitely raised a lot of eyebrows with people. Even back when it happened, before we knew, even way before this practice, months ago, I think people were suspecting that there was something more going on than what we were all aware of. So it'll be interesting, man. We'll see if Cade, how long he can make it through, if he plays the whole season, or if it's just a couple weeks before he gets benched, for whether it's because he's still dinged up or whether there's, other problems coming around. But I thought it was worth mentioning because it's definitely going around, making the rounds on Twitter. And I felt like we should definitely talk about it because it's, I'd be concerned if I were an Iowa fan.
Yeah, I'd be worried too, because Brendan Sullivan is a perfectly solid backup quarterback, but I am not at all convinced that he is a guy you want to be your starting quarterback running the offense week to week, doing that. I don't think he is that. I think he's a below average Big Ten quarterback. Whereas Cade McNamara has proven in the past to be an above average, significantly above average Big Ten quarterback. So if he's got the yips, or he's still hurt, or whatever is going on, that the Iowa beat writers are saying this is a quarterback competition.
Mm-hmm.
John, this should not be a quarterback competition. This should have been Cade McNamara saying, this is my job and that's the way it is.
Yep.
Kind of thing. Like the fact that it's a competition at all makes me really nervous for Iowa and for Cade.
Yeah, that's where my head's at, and I think I've been kind of you and I have been sniffing this out for a while now. Just I don't think we're alone in this. I think there's definitely other people out there who looked at this the same way, and including Iowa fans at this point too. And so, yeah, man, it's going to be interesting. Cade, when he was healthy and he was on it, he's a great quarterback. He clearly he's proven that to everybody in the conference.
Yeah.
And obviously Iowa put in a lot of money to get him there and to keep him there.
A lot of
so we're going to see, man, is it going to pay off or is this going to crash and burn?
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting because it is hard to come back after injuries. And the truth is occasionally guys aren't the same, right?
Yeah.
Like Mackenzie Milton famously had the one injury, came back from that, was amazing, but then had another injury. And the second time it didn't work out, So, I mean, we wish Cade the best, I hope it works out for him. But I am a little, I'm with you. If I'm an Iowa fan, I'm concerned. The fact that the Iowa beat writers seem concerned makes me concerned because they're the guys who are closest to the team. They're the ones following it. And if they're saying this is a full out quarterback competition, then something has gone very wrong.
Yep. Yeah, I hope he can. Yeah, first off, I just hope he's healthy.
Yes.
For sure. Yes. Because I think he's a great addition to the team when he is. But whatever's going on, absolutely, we wish him the best. Neither of us like to see that happen, even when it is our rivals. We don't like to see when people are hurt and can't play the game.
No, we want to see teams full strength. It's fun to see. I want to see when you have this great collection of awesome athletes like you do on a Big Ten college football field, you want to see all the athletes. You want to see everybody play.
100%.
You want everyone to roll out their best, their best 22 plus special teams and see how it goes.
Yep, absolutely. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens here in the next couple of weeks. Maybe more will come out.
Yep, for sure. John, the Oregon Duck is making the rounds of the Big Ten. And for those of you who aren't on Twitter, Oregon has been, or haven't seen the promotional, Oregon has had their duck show up at every Big Ten stadium seemingly and try to get in with a caption that says, "Let me in."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to lie, it's cute. Like, it was the first few times I saw it, it was funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sort of over it at this point, but like, I get that it's a strong branding move and like, I don't knock them for it at all. But here's the thing about joining a new conference is you don't always know joining a new conference is kind of like going to a party with people you don't know very well.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know all the rules of their little social circle and the things that are important to them and the sort of, the things you shouldn't, the third rail things that you shouldn't touch. Mm-hmm. And the Oregon Duck sort of touched the stove and made a little bit of a fool out of himself when he was more or less prostrated on top of Hep's Rock at Indiana. And of course, Coach Hepner died of brain cancer and was a really inspirational figure at IU. So, the Oregon Duck basically humping Hep's Rock was maybe not the best move.
Yeah, you would have hoped that someone would have maybe had that information readily available before they took that photo op.
How do you miss that? How do you miss something like that?
I don't know. Or even if somebody from the university someone from IU would have been like, no, like, sorry, we can't do that. Like, that wouldn't be appropriate, So someone dropped the ball,
Yes.
Which is unfortunate. It is disrespectful in my opinion, and I know that's the whole like gimmick I think Oregon is just running with. Like, they don't care who, we're the loudest, most obnoxious fan base in the Big Ten now. I mean, beg to differ in certain ways, but I think
that is how they're branding themselves.
How they're branding
they
themselves.
want the attention. They
Yes, they
want
do.
the smoke.
Yeah, I mean that's why they tried to come up with the whole thing of now, oh, we want to be known as that team from out west. Like nobody's
Which
gonna
no
call
one
you.
will ever call you ever.
No, but so now you're purposefully just trying to stoke this fire and get people riled up, and it's working. It is. There's definitely a lot of people who are upset and angry. In some of it, yeah, like I get it. It's all in good fun. You want to start some rivalries. You want to get people upset, fan bases. Like getting these jabs going. Totally. Like I get it. That's what this is about. We've all been doing it for years.
It's a branding exercise. Like I get
for
it.
Sure.
And like I said, I think the Oregon Duck thing has been really cute, except for the Heps Rock thing, which was just not appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything else I don't have a problem with. That was the one
not
thing
at all.
that I was, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, when I saw it, when it's clinging to the fence and like trying to climb, like it's gonna climb in, like that's funny.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm all for that. It's like, and that's all in good fun.
Yep.
Someone should have been there, to deter that from happening, but unfortunately that's what it was, so hopefully it won't happen again.
Yes. I'm sure it won't. I can't imagine anyone's making that mistake again. That was a welcome to the Big Ten for Oregon. So I imagine that the rest of the things they do, they'll probably be a little more careful and do a little more research and make sure they don't embarrass the university like that again a little bit.
Yeah, well, we'll see. According to some of their rivals, some Washington fans and USC fans, that this is exactly what they do all the time.
Sure. Well, we're gonna find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. Yeah, but that's all right. Otherwise, not a lot going on as far as Big Ten news this week.
No, it's camp, man. If there's news out of camp or not, everyone's practicing. It's an exciting time of year. We are 2.5 weeks from the first kickoff of the Big Ten football season on that opening Thursday. So this is a fun time of year.
Yep.
And I'm pumped. I'm pumped to preview all three of these teams tonight.
Yeah, man. It's going to be great. And you can feel it, man. You can feel the energy. It felt like fall this week. That was really exciting. Got me really into the mood. I was like, oh man, like that's, that's why I had to build a fire pit. I was like, well, let's do it. Like, that's what you got to do. Like, let's make it happen. Preparing for the best. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
It really is.
It really is.
Everyone's undefeated.
Yep.
Hope springs eternal. Your best players are hopefully not injured yet. Like, it's a good time of year.
Yeah. But it is sad when you see that, man. I think there's some Texas and Texas A&M two running backs that have now gone down with injury. So it is sad when you see that, but hopefully everybody can stay relatively healthy, not only now, but also throughout the season.
Notre Dame lost a left tackle too, starting left tackle.
Oh man. Wow.
So that's rough. But yeah, so let's hope that everyone in the Big Ten stays healthy and we can have a really fun football season for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. There's so much depth here in this conference, man. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. And we're going to get into that today about how good some of these teams are that may not be the first teams that the national media wants to talk about, but that are teams that are really exciting and there are awesome reasons to watch them in their own right.
Absolutely.
All right. Should we go to Bloomington and talk about the Indiana Hoosiers?
Love that.
Sure. So Indiana has a soft spot in my heart, John. As you know, my significant other is an IU alum and comes from a family of IU alums. So they've kind of showed me the ways of the Hoosiers. And I will say it's not biasing my coverage at all, but just because they gave me this, it would be remiss if I didn't pull out the hat. So here's my Indiana hat.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we got to put it on for sure, dude. There you go. That looks good. That looks really good, man. It looks good.
I'm going to do it backwards. It's too much this way.
All right. Yeah. For everybody that can't see, he's got the IU hat, the IU on the back, and it looks fantastic. I would definitely. I've always been a fan of the Hoosiers, man. Always a great
Yeah.
team.
I mean, they've captivated me since Antoine Randall, right?
There you go. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that guy, he haunted my dreams when I was a small child. He really did. But you got to love Bloomington. It's a great city, great college town. And yeah, let's talk about the Hoosiers. So we actually have a lot of contributors, John, for IU. So that is pretty exciting. So here are the people we have who kicked in, and thank you to all our contributors for giving us your inside fan perspective of your teams. So we've got at K Jaro, at Dom the Rev, at All For You Pod. And the All For You Pod, you should all listen to it. It's a great Indiana podcast for all things Hoosiers. Like, if you want to know, when I want to know what's up with the Hoosiers, I go to the All For You Pod. Absolutely. And from the All For You Pod, we've got at Mike Wood Son with 2 N's, at B-Town Bucket Boy, and at Invest in IUFB. So thank you to all of you for your contributions. And because we have so many people, John, I think I'll get in the first question or two, I will give all their responses, and then I'll kind of bring them together so we don't, we're not here all night.
Yes.
But I will say a couple of these people sent manifestos.
I believe it, man. Well, I feel like we get those more often than not. Like, we really do. Amazing how much information we get. It's incredible.
It is fantastic. I love it. All right. So now that you've seen how your team did in the portal and how spring went, what is your expectation for this season? What's your projected record for 2024? Dom the Rev said, what are the expectations of Indiana football? That's a great existential question.
Of course.
Is it possible to have expectations for the team that has lost more games over the last 137 years than any team in the FBS? Well, it is possible. And you did ask it. Yes, we did. So here's what I've got. I expect Indiana to look like a serious football team. I expect them to play like a serious football team. I can't say that's what I've always seen from Indiana football. As far as a projected record, I'm going back off my postseason 8-win projection, going with 7. So either Indiana goes 6-6 in the regular season and wins the lower tier bowl, or gets to 7 in the regular season and loses a bowl game that they just have too much of a talent deficit in. So yeah, so big hopes right there. K Jaro describes herself as an optimistic realist and says, I would be thrilled with 7-5, just wants them to be bowl eligible to kick off the new Signetti era. The All For You Pod also projects a 7-5 record, says the non-conference is too weak to assume they don't go 3-0, and their opening conference slate includes UCLA, Maryland at home, Northwestern on the Lake, Nebraska at home and off their bye, Washington at home, and Sparty. Adding a home game against Purdue at 7-5 starts to look like a letdown year against this schedule. Well, if the Hoosiers get to 7-5, it's not a letdown year. It's a big deal because it's been a while.
Deal. Yep.
But I understand that is a really favorable schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite realize until I started researching this episode. I didn't realize what a favorable schedule that Indiana has. So we'll talk more about that as we go on. All right. Number 2, rank the following position groups and how strong you think they are comparatively. All right. Dom went wide receiver, QB, secondary, RB, OL, special teams, linebacker, DL, tight end. The All For You Pod went wide receiver, QB, RB, DL, linebacker, outside, OL, DB, tight end, special teams. And K Jaro was pretty similar. So as you see, the wide receiver, the QB, the running backs, and the offensive line towards the top, John, that's going to get to be a little bit of a common theme in this podcast, in that Indiana should be prolific on offense. And we'll talk about that as we get into it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Which players are the best in each position group? QB Curtis Rourke, RB Kalen Black, Justice Ellison, wide receiver Donovan McCulley and Elijah Surratt, tight end Zach Horton, offensive line Mike Kadich, Carter Smith, DL, Mikhail Kamara, and James Carpenter, linebacker Aiden Fisher. Oh man, Aiden Fisher's good.
Yeah,
he's real good. And Jalen Walker, secondary D'Angelo Pons, and special teams, James Evans, the punter. So that's what Dom thought. The All for You pod was pretty similar with that. Talked a lot about Donovan McCulley, Elijah Surratt, Curtis Rourke, same people. Talked about, also brought up Tyson Lawton at running back, who was productive at James Madison. Mentions transfer DT CJ West on the defensive line. Yeah, and otherwise pretty much the same crew of players, along with Jameer Johnson at corner. All right, which players who are going to play this fall are unproven or proven to be questionable? Dom said he saved this question for last because he's not really sure how to answer it. The whole team is unproven. Every player is either brand new to the team or they were on a team that didn't, prove a lot last year. I would say their James Madison team proved something, and they've got a lot of James Madison transfers. So I would quibble with that a little bit. But I see what he's saying. It is a brand new kind of team.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be, there's gonna be some questions at cornerback and safety. So in the secondary, we don't know totally what to expect. And I would say that's somewhat true. That's what the All for You pod is talking about. All right, number 5. How did the transfer portal go? Which portal players will make the biggest impact this season? Cignetti went in the portal hard, John.
Yeah. He did great.
He really did. And did awesome. All for You pod said it's difficult to narrow down any single one of those players as a portal target to watch, but they hope they've conveyed how unique of a situation Kirk Cignetti has built at IU. He's used the modern portal to bring in a ton of all conference level and all American level FCS talent and some lower level group of 5 talent. So that's really interesting. And I agree with him that there are some, that's whether that works or not, that'll be something people study. And if it does work, I think you'll see other teams try to recreate that in the future. So some of their transfers, just real quick, we mentioned a couple of them. From JMU, D'Angelo Pons, wide receiver Elijah Surratt, James Carpenter at D tackle, DN Mikhail Kamara, linebacker Aiden Fisher, offensive line Nick Kidwell, linebacker Jalen Walker, offensive line Tyler Stevens, tight end Zach Horton. And that's just, there's a lot more than that. I'm not going to name all of them, but they've got a lot. And Curtis Rourke, of course, the Ohio quarterback. Yeah. You got to mention him because he's going to be a big key to how this team develops this year. Which members of the coaching staff are in prove-it mode this year? Will these coaches get fired if things don't go well for them? It's year 1, so they're saying, they're not really in prove-it mode. Although Dom says when you talk like Coach Sig does, everyone's in prove-it mode because you have to back it up. And I think that's fair. And we'll get to that when we get to our thoughts on the whole team. We'll talk about Cignetti a little bit because he is an interesting coach this year for me. How do you feel about your head coach heading into 2024? Everyone feels really good and is excited about Cignetti. The All for You pod basically said that, they've done a ton, that basically they've gotten everything they wanted from the university. They got an A+ hire. They got program buy-in. They got Mark Cuban giving money. They have all kinds of stuff happening.
Good for them.
So they feel really good about where they are compared to where they've been. Besides QB, in your opinion, what position on your team can least afford injuries? So the answers are defensive line, linebackers, and the interior of the offensive line. So
it's the same for every single team we've ever covered.
It is. You're right. Yeah. But I do think that shows that on this Indiana team, I do think we're going to come back to the trenches and whether or not they can hold up in the trenches. And I think that's going to be a big story that to tell of how this season's going to play out.
Mm-hmm.
How well is your team set up for the short and long term in the new big conference? Short term, great. They have Indiana has a really favorable schedule. They have the 3 lowest SP plus teams in the league in Purdue, Michigan State, and Northwestern on the schedule. So there's a path to really doing something big this year.
Mm-hmm.
Long term, it's tough to know. Obviously the football gods have not always smiled on Indiana, but they're trying really hard to get out of the hole they're in. And I think that's impressive. And I think I think Indiana, that shows that they're willing to compete in a way that maybe they weren't always.
Yeah, it seems like they're willing to invest money into this program, which you have to now if you want to
Yes.
compete. Absolutely. So it's good to see.
K Jaro thinks that if Sig and company can carry on and have some success this year, then they're looking pretty good going forward. And the All For You pod said this season's a massive experiment, like they already said, with all these FCS players they brought up to the Big Ten level to see how that goes. And says over the long haul, who knows? But it's hard not to be optimistic of what Signetti can do at IU in the roughly 10 years he has before he retires. And that is a really good point about Signetti. And we'll talk about that when we get to our thoughts on it. All right, last question. A lot of teams who are used to winning 7 to 9 games a season might have to change their expectations. What will constitute a successful season this year? How well are you set up for that? Dom says you can't recalibrate your expectation of 9 wins if you never win 9 games. Although they've done it twice, he says. 1945 and 1967. But seriously, though, they'll have to work hard to make it to the postseason. And that's going to be where they're at for a while as they build that program, working hard to make it to the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
All For You pod says the Indiana Hoosiers, John, have not won a bowl game since the 1991 Copper Bowl. 91. Wow. That brass ring has been there to grab for 33 years. It is a low bar to clear but failing to do so with this collection of players would seem like a failure. I think the only way Indiana fans could stomach not winning a bowl game this year is if IU plays its way into a bowl that it's not ready to compete in and goes win 7 or 8 games or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. All right. Thoughts, John?
I'm excited about this team. I really think that there's a lot of talent here, like we talked about, as far as bringing in from the transfer portal and keeping players that were in the transfer portal. I mean, holding on to Donovan McCulley is massive, and I was not expecting that. Yeah.
No. I thought he was going to go to the highest bidder for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and more, I thought he was going to go to some helmet school and
yes.
know, just be outstanding. Because he's incredible.
Oh, he's a special player.
So in seeing Curtis Rourke come in, he definitely has proven it on the field. He's got the experience. I think that he's a fantastic addition. I feel a lot more confident with him running that offense for sure. I think as well what I loved during the spring game, which of course is just, I get it, it's just the spring game, but it looked like they had 3 competent running backs, 2 of them that looked fantastic. I saw a lot of speed. I saw them run hard, a lot of strength and size too, which was good to see. So if Indiana's offensive line can keep Rourke clean in the pocket and can run block, I think this team absolutely can compete. Defensively, I'm not entirely sure right now. I couldn't give you any kind of guaranteed feel on it. We both know that it's got to improve in a big way in their secondary, because last year it was full of holes. It was kind of a mess. So I want to see that improve this year. I think they could. I think they brought over some good pieces from JMU. I think Curt Cignetti, as far as just a program guy, dude, he's great. I love him. I'm sure
he's so entertaining.
He is, man, and maybe it's just us, like with being around PJ for so long now, that's what I look for, because it gets you excited and you want that, not just, I think what people don't understand from other fan bases who have coaches that have little to no personality, and have for decades, they don't understand what it's like to have be a fan of a team that maybe the fan base has become apathetic, and you need someone like Curt Cignetti or a PJ Fleck or whatever. Even the quirkiness of Brett Bielema, in his wild statements that he says he's much more subdued, but still, you need that to reinvigorate not just your players, but you need the fans to show up and be excited. And he's accomplished that already. And yes, it's outlandish. It's pretty crazy. It's wild. But you know what? Good. Like, why not? Like we talked about already with the preseason and everything that's going on in camp right now, everyone should be optimistic. There's no reason not to be. And I love the calls on going, winning 7 or 8 games. I think that would be wildly successful.
Yes.
And like someone stated, winning 7 games is now in the new Big Ten. That's a huge accomplishment for anybody.
Yeah.
So, especially for Indiana at this point in time. So, if they win that, which they do, I think they have a road to that with looking at their schedule. You have every reason to believe that it could happen. I do. I think it could.
For sure. We'll get into the schedule and we'll talk about what we think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Curt Cignetti, man, he set the bar high.
Yes.
He came in and immediately said that, well, Purdue sucks, so do Ohio State and Michigan. He took aim at those programs right away. He also memorably guaranteed that Indiana would make the conference title game this year.
Let's do it.
This year. And he also mentioned Indiana and national championship in the same breath. So he hasn't just talked the talk, though. He's walked the walk. In 13 seasons as a head coach, John, Cignetti has never had a losing season.
Yep.
In 13 years, never had a losing record. That's incredible, especially because he's made several stops at different schools, at different levels, with different resources. So he's run everywhere he's been, and he's promised Indiana is going to be the next in a long line of Curt Cignetti triumphs. He was a little more guarded at Big Ten Media Days, but the message is clear. The Hoosiers are here to win. They're here to win now. There's no year zero for Curt Cignetti, because if he wanted to tamp down the expectations, he could have done that. He didn't do it. He kept everybody on the roster that he wanted. He brought in a bajillion transfers and said, we're going to win right now. And that's an aggressive tack. I think in the old days, you would say that that's not really a way to build for the future. But I also think that, like, in this day and age, you want to be able to sell results.
Yeah.
So if you can get results in year 1, you can sell those results on the recruiting trail. And we've already seen Cignetti have some impressive, do some impressive stuff on the recruiting trail. So that's all really good. When I look at their offensive line, they bring back a good mix of returners in Mike, Katie and Carter Smith, along with transfers Nick Kidwell from JMU and Troy Wettig from Wisconsin. And most importantly, the one guy that Cignetti kept from Wisconsin staff, from Indiana's Tom Allen staff at Indiana was former Wisconsin offensive line coach Bob Bostad.
Yep.
And Bob Bostad is a genius. He is one of the great offensive line coaches in college, in the NFL, or college. So it's a huge coup to keep him on the staff and to bring in all that other energy the way they have. Curtis Rourke was a legend at Ohio. He was amazing in the MAC. We've talked about it. They're going to be really good at receiver with McCulley and Elijah Surratt. Zach Horton's looks like a really good tight end. This offense is going to score a bunch of points, and they're going to be a fierce unit.
Yep.
Now, what about the defense? Let's talk defense, because we have to. They're further behind on this side of the ball.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress. They were blindsided in the spring when DN Philip Bleedy left the day before workouts began to go to Auburn, and cornerback Kobe Minor left after spring ball ended. They did a good job in bringing in James Madison cornerback D'Angelo Pons and Kent State DL CJ West. Aiden Fisher looks like the answer at middle linebacker, which could be really good news for the Hoosiers in the middle. He had over 100 tackles last year, should be even better this season. Cignetti called Fisher a QB of the defense, so that's high praise. I'm worried about this Hoosier defensive line, John. I think they're going to have some big problems there this year. I'm not sure if they have the depth and talent to hold up. The bottom line is that IU finished near the bottom of FBS in scoring defense over the past 3 seasons. And while I think the transfers will help, and I think they'll be improved, I think it's a lot of different transfers. It's going to take a while for those guys to gel.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what that's going to look like early in the season. And I'm not sure how effective it's going to be overall in the long term. I think Indiana is going to be in a lot of high scoring games. I think they're going to put up points and they're going to get scored on a lot. And they are going to be a wildly entertaining team to watch, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, and John, just so you know, on special teams, James Evans is a former rugby player who was a fantastic punter last year, averaging nearly 46 yards per punt.
Wow.
46, which is highly impressive.
That's must be nice.
Yeah, must be great. That'll help. I predict that'll help Indiana win at least one game, flipping the field.
Oh yeah,
doing that kind of thing. And their place kicker Nicholas Radicic is competing with Derek McCormick, so we don't know what that's going to look like. So should we play the schedule game?
Yep, let's look at it.
All right. So Indiana starts out with 2 really winnable games. They've got FIU, who went 4-8 last year, and Western Illinois. And boy, the Leathernecks were 0-11 last season. So those are both games they should win going away and get a lot of confidence in those games. Then they have a big game in the season, their Big Ten opener at UCLA. Now, we know UCLA and Indiana are both projected to be towards the bottom of the conference. So whichever team wins this game is going to be more likely to have a chance to be better and achieve their goals than the team that loses. So I think that's a really big game right away.
Yep.
Then they play Charlotte to round out the non-con. Charlotte went 3-9 last year. So they should win all their non-conference games. And if they beat, I mean, John, Indiana could be 4-0.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real possibility.
I think it's very possible. I wouldn't put that out of, no, I would, I mean, frankly, right now, I would pick them over UCLA from what I'm aware of at this point in time.
Yeah, it is a road game, but I agree with you. I would think that Indiana would be more likely to win that game than UCLA. You go back to the schedule, then they got Maryland at Northwestern. So those are both very winnable games.
Mm-hmm.
And then then they have Nebraska, and then Washington, and then Sparty. So those are all winnable games. I'm not saying they're going to win all of them. I'm not saying Indiana's going to win 8 or 9 games. I'm not saying that at all.
Sure.
But those are all games that they could have a chance in. This is a really favorable schedule.
It's really favorable. I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. I know people are talking about the Hoosiers doing well, but I don't think they're understanding how great this schedule is setting them up.
This schedule's amazing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, then it gets hard. Then they play Michigan and at Ohio State.
Yeah.
But then they finish the game in the old Oaken, or the year with the old Oaken Bucket game against Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, John, I look at this this schedule. There's really only 2 games where I think IU has no chance.
Yeah.
And it's Ohio State and Michigan. Other than that, they're going to have a shot. And if they can win half of those toss-ups, or even a third of those toss-ups,
yeah,
they could get to a bowl game on that.
I mean, I think at this point, with the expectation, if they don't make a bowl game, it's going to be horribly disappointing.
Hugely disappointing, because they will never, the Hoosiers will never have a schedule this favorable again.
Yeah.
Ever. Like, this is as good as it gets in the new Big Ten.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is
you got a bunch of teams in transition.
Yep.
Starting with new coaches or new coordinators, new systems, teams switching leagues. I mean, this is as good as it gets, John.
Well, and that's why I'm in favor of them beating UCLA, especially this early in the season too. Yeah. With that schedule, is like you're having a brand new coach who's never been a head coach, joining a brand new conference. And so you got a shot, you really do. And I understand, Indiana's in somewhat of a similar situation. I get that you have a brand new coach, but I just feel like you're set up better for it right now. Especially with what Cignetti was able to retain. I think that they're more Big Ten ready than UCLA is at this point.
Right.
And which they should be. So yeah, man, I'm seeing for sure 6 wins, and I know that sounds weird, but
sure 6, right?
Yeah, I see for sure 6 wins. 7 is not crazy, and I don't know. I mean, if they won 8, I'd be like, yeah, okay. Someone could totally convince me of 8 wins. Absolutely.
If they got hot, if Curtis Rourke and this passing offense are just electric, and they can stay somewhat healthy on defense.
Yep.
Yeah. They could. I mean, I don't think they're going to win 8 games, because I think that ultimately, it's one thing to have a couple few FCS transfers that need to contribute. It's another thing to have like a fleet of them that need to all contribute. Like some of those guys statistically probably aren't going to work out great.
Yeah.
But a lot of those guys will. A lot of them will work out. And yeah, this is a fascinating team, John. I mean, this is a high variance team.
Absolutely.
I think week in and week out, it's going to be hard to know if the games are going to be close. I think there are going to be times the Hoosiers get blown out and you don't expect it. And there'll be games that they are in till the end that you don't expect it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we saw them hang with Ohio State for a little bit last year. I know this is a different team, but like, you know, the Hoosiers can be feisty. They got some weapons out there. Can happen.
I mean, I think Donovan McCulley is right up there with anybody in the conference as a receiver.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
with him and Curtis Rourke playing pitch and catch, it's going to be fun. The thing is, if they get banged up at all on the line of scrimmage, at all, it could be really ugly. I mean, they could, especially their D-line, they could just get run through on the D-line.
Yeah.
And if they get run through, then they're not going to win very many games. So that's my concern. If it goes wrong this year, if Indiana does not make a bowl game, which I am predicting they're going to make a bowl game, I think they're going to go 6-6, maybe even 7-5. I'm predicting 6-6 for the Hoosiers.
Same.
But I don't. But if they don't make it, it's going to be because it fell apart on that defensive line, I think.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because Aiden Fisher is great, but if the guys in front of you don't make plays, a linebacker doesn't have a chance.
Yep. Yeah. It's going to be fun, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Lots of fun.
Yeah.
Right on. All right. Should we move on to Champaign?
Let's do that.
And talk about the Illinois Illini. All right. I'm going to remove this. All right, our Illinois contributor, we've got Austin, who on Twitter is at AB1132. So a great follow and a content creator in his own right. So check out his stuff. It's all good, very good Illinois stuff. If you want to keep up on the Illini. All right, now that you've seen how your team did in the portal and how spring went, what's your expectation for this season? What's your projected record for 2024? Looking at the portal, the Illini improved in some areas. He thinks that they lifted the floor of the season. Before the portaling, he was thinking 5-7, but looking at it now, he thinks 7-5. Rank the following for position groups and how strong you think they are comparatively. QBs, RBs, wide receivers, tight ends, O-line, D-line, linebackers, secondary, special teams.
QBs first before RBs. Okay.
I know that shocked me as well, but here we are.
Yeah.
Which players are the best for each position group? Talked about right away. RB Caden Fagan, who was so good last year, other than when he was hurt, but when he was healthy, was really good. JC Davis, transfer O lineman. Luke Altmaier, in his second year as quarterback, should be a lot better. Cole Rusk was an FCS All-American tight end and could be a good target. Zachary Franklin is the nation's leading wide receiver in terms of is one of the leading wide receivers in terms of production. He's better than what he was at Ole Miss, he says. And Sledge on the D-line is really good from Auburn. He's an older player. I think he's a 7th-year guy. And Terrence Brooks from Texas. That was a big win for them in the secondary. So those are some guys who are going to make a difference on the field for the Illini this year, and we'll be watching out for all of those. Which players are going to play this fall who are unproven or proven to be questionable? There's going to be a lot of pressure on the young secondary plus wide receiver Malik Elzy. Elzy was a 4-star guy who didn't do enough to stay on the field as a freshman, but now he's climbed into that second receiver role, and they expect him, to step up and make a difference this year. How did the transfer portal go? Which transfer portal players will make the biggest impact this season? Terrence Brooks, Zachary Franklin, JC Davis, Ennis Sledge. Which members of the coaching staff are in prove-it mode this year? Will these coaches be fired if things don't go well for their position groups? Really, it's only Aaron Henry, who's in his second year as a DC, taking over for Ryan Walters, who became the Boilermaker head coach. If this defense does not step up, Brett will have to make a move probably, because that'd be 2 years in a row that the defense just didn't get the job done.
Yeah.
How do you feel about your head coach heading into 2024? He said Brett has done a decent to good job keeping recruiting at a respectable level. He thinks the Illini need to be a little more aggressive. He thinks that Brett's too passive on 4th downs and short and in 2-minute drills, which is fair.
I mean, he was pretty aggressive last year against us, but
against us he was. But it's fair to say that over time he hasn't always been.
Sure.
Except for when he gets he was desperate, because that game was all but over, and we don't really need to open up that wound again. I've healed from that, John. I've healed from that wound. I've left it behind me. Let's move on. It's 2024.
That was for you, Illini fans. You get
yes,
that.
You get one. We give you one, Illini fans, and that was your shout out.
Yep.
Besides QB in your position, or your opinion, what position on your team can least afford injuries? They said the secondary. So that's interesting. That's not an answer we get very often. How well is your team set up for the short and long term in the new big? They said having repeat games with Purdue and Northwestern as the same rivals helps out a lot, as the rivals every year helps out a lot. Long term, it's tough to tell. Said he's confident they can go bowling year after year at minimum. And then I said, what will constitute a successful season, and how well are you set up for that? He said, keep going bowling. All right, John, thoughts on the Illini?
You and I have kind of talked about this as far as Bert and how he coaches and what you expect from him year after year. And generally, if he has a down year, you don't expect him to stay down.
No.
I think it's fair, actually, to not mention the offensive or defensive lines as a concern to a degree, because I do believe that Brett is able to recruit pretty darn well and develop really well at those positions. But I think on the defensive line, what are they going to do without Jerzon Newton? And I think
they struggled with him last year.
Exactly. So that's going to be interesting pieces to me, how that comes together, how their defensive line, if they're able to gel, if they're able to find another guy that's somewhat of a game wrecker. I don't expect them to be as good as them, but if maybe as a whole, they'll be able to be as effective.
Right.
But I'm really, to me, the strength, that's why I mentioned with quarterback over running back, is this running game to me looks like it's going to be terrifying.
This running game is going to be great. I will say, Brett Bielema was basically telling the preview, telling reporters that this is the deepest, best offensive line he has had in his tenure at Illinois.
Yeah.
So that should make you feel like this offense is going to bounce back this year, especially in the running game.
Mm-hmm.
And like we said, when they do run the ball, Caden Fagan will be a force, complemented by the fast Aiden Laffery and a bigger back in Josh McCray.
Yeah. I think they have so much power right there, and they've got a good amount of speed with Laffery. I think that this is going to be a dangerous team. They are going to wear you down. He's basically bringing back the Wisconsin football that that when he was coaching at Wisconsin. He's doing the same thing as what he's building here offensively.
Oh yeah, bully ball for sure.
Yeah, with a quarterback that can do just enough. And if Altmaier can bounce back from last year, he was very up and down. There were times I was like, holy cow, who's this guy? He's electric. He can move with his legs. He can run, he's thrown all over the field, but it was a lot of feast or famine with him. So we'll have to see if he's able to develop and, get rid of some of those habits or some of those mistakes that I think he could be very effective, especially with this kind of game. But, they're also having to replace some pieces at receiver that I'm not entirely sure what to expect at this point either. So it's going to be, they're going to run the ball incredibly well. I think I have faith in that they're going to be able to shove people around and just beat you into submission. Defensive line, I have some question marks. But other than that, I feel pretty good about this team. I think that this is a team that can go bowling. Absolutely. How high their ceiling is, I'm not really sure yet.
Yeah, it's interesting, Altmaier. I feel like Brett Bielema was playing the wrong quarterback last year.
I totally agree.
I thought John Paddock, when he came in, was better than Altmaier significantly throwing the ball.
Yep.
But Bielema feels comfortable with a guy who can move a little bit, not because he wants to run the quarterback in the running game a lot, but he wants him to be able to scramble for first downs
Yep.
on passing plays.
Well, that's how
So I
Russell
think,
Wilson just killed everybody. It's the
yeah,
same formula.
absolutely. So I think that I agree with you, man. This offensive line should be really good. They bring back the entire interior line, center Josh Kreutz, left guard Josh Geske, right guard Zy Chrysler. They also won a big recruiting battle for New Mexico transfer J.C. Davis to play left tackle. So I think that's a really big deal. I think this team's going to be able to run the ball. I'm not sure how well they'll pass. I think it's going to be up and down. It's probably going to be game to game. I do think losing Casey Washington and losing Isaiah Williams to the NFL is going to hurt.
Yeah, agreed.
So Pat Bryant can do some things. Will Malik Elzy step up? They need him to. And Ashton Hollins as well. Somebody's got to step up and make some plays. Illinois has a lot to replace on defense, John. And they've got 3 new assistant coaches under a second-year coordinator, a highly scrutinized second-year coordinator. Yep. Secondary was bad last year. I will say getting Texas cornerback Terrence Brooks out of the portal should help a lot. He played a lot at Texas and contributed. Nickel Xavier Scott could slide outside a cornerback, leaving Tyler Strain at nickel. Matthew Bailey and Miles Scott will start at safety. The outside linebackers will be really good. And Seth Coleman and Gabe Jackass.
Yeah.
And Alec Bryant. They should be really good there. The defensive line, though, man, I don't know. I don't know about the D line, and I don't know about linebacker. And I think, you know what I think? I think that Illinois is going to be like the running version of Indiana in some ways. I think they're going to give up a lot of yards and they're going to give up points, but they're going to control the ball a lot. They're going to hold the ball. They're going to run the ball really well, and they're going to try to shorten games and win that way. Yep. So I think even if their defense isn't very good, which I don't think it's going to be very good, I do think they're going to win some games just based off of that running game. There are going to be days when that running game is impossible to stop, and Illinois is going to take advantage, and they're going to win those games.
Yeah, I agree. And if Altmaier can manage to, get back to where he was, I think early in the season, last year, I think he had some bright spots that looked really good. You could see what his potential was, and his athleticism purely, was just pretty incredible. I think that if you can scheme that up right, and you can find at least 1 or 2, reliable receivers, you're going to be able to have a really pretty effective offense, and be able to score some points. But yeah, man, I'm with you too.
He's got to limit turnovers this year. He threw too many picks last year.
Yes.
And he actually did better with interceptions later in the year than earlier. So that's a good sign. Maybe he's making progress in Barry Lunny's system, And so they have that continuity with the offensive coordinator and the quarterback, which is not something Brett Bielema has had before in his tenure. So that could be really useful for them. I think it's going to have to be, John, because I don't think they're going to be very good on defense like they normally are. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Brett Bielema's looking for a new defensive coordinator after this season.
Yeah. And I think there's been a lot of talk as far as, coaches after this year that may or may not be on the hot seat in the Big Ten. And Brett Bielema's name keeps coming up. I think that, unfortunately, I do think he's an excellent coach, but he's a great coach, man. It's tough in Illinois, dude.
It's tough. Illinois is a tough job. It's a basketball school.
Yep.
And their fans are so into basketball, and they show up the Orange Crush student section, and they're loud and they're intimidating, but their fans do not show up for football games.
Yeah.
And it's not an intimidating place to play. They don't have a big home field advantage. And I think when you don't have a home field advantage, I think it makes it hard.
I agree.
Because the players feed off of, these aren't fully, I know they're professionals in the way we pay them now, but they're not fully professionals yet. They are still young men who are learning, and they feed off of that crowd energy, I think, more than seasoned pros maybe do.
Well, that's what I taught, the point I made earlier with Indiana and having Kurt Cignetti show up, and you need that, that affected, we saw it firsthand in Minnesota.
Yep.
From what it was before PJ Fleck showed up, and how the fan engagement, and he personally made a point of doing that and making sure he was
Yes.
engaging with the fans and getting them into the stadium and filling those seats, and that changed
Yes.
the recruiting that brought in better players, and in so I think I know Brett's
If
not
you
that
look
kind
at
of guy.
Minnesota, Minnesota's had a good home record
Yeah,
overall
yeah, overall.
because of that.
I know that's not Brett's thing probably, but hopefully that if they can get some, get a few more wins this year, go bowling, maybe that'll reinvigorate the crowd and they can get some fans back into back into that stadium. So,
Should we play the schedule game?
sure.
All right. So, Illinois starts off. They've got a little bit of a tough schedule at times. They start off with Eastern Illinois, who went 8-3 last year. So that's no joke.
Mhm.
They should win that game, but then they go right away. They host Kansas. And Kansas won 9 games this year and is projected to be one of the better teams in the Big 12.
Absolutely.
So Illinois is going to have to man ball Kansas. They're going to have to run all over them. They're going to have to shorten the game because Kansas is a rhythm, up-tempo offense. And if you let them have too many reps, they're going to
Yep.
score on you.
Yep.
So Illinois, I think it's going to be really important in that game, in all their games, but especially in that game, that they win the time of possession battle. Then they have Central Michigan. They should win that game easily. So that's a good one. And then they have a couple tough games in a row. They got to go to Lincoln and play Nebraska, and then they have to go to Happy Valley and take on Penn State.
Oof.
Then they have Purdue at home, but then they have Michigan at home. And then they go to Oregon. And then they host Minnesota. And then they end the season Sparty at Rutgers versus Northwestern. So that is not an easy schedule. That's not an easy schedule at all.
No.
With Penn State and Michigan and Oregon, and you have to play them all in a 5-week span.
Yeah, that's rough.
That back-to-back Michigan at Oregon, at Penn State, Purdue, Michigan at Oregon, Minnesota. That's what they have going into up to their bye week. That's tough. So, it's going to be really important. Brett's really got to beat Kansas, man.
Yep. Yeah.
He's really got to beat Kansas. And then if he doesn't beat Kansas, then he better beat Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And
I know he's got a history with Lance Leipold, and I think that they're definitely they're buddies, they're friends, and I assume that Brett is not going to forget what happened last year. And
no,
there were times in that game where you could see the potential of Illinois being able to take over and win.
Yeah.
But
it was a close game.
It was. So I think I would have to believe that Brett's going to be as prepared as possible. I think he's got some better weapons, especially being able to have a more balanced, running and passing attack, I think, than last year. I don't think Love was necessarily the answer. Reggie Love, the third.
Right.
So I'm thinking that they have a little bit more going offensively, but like you said, if they're able to slow down Kansas at all, there's a potential for that they could, tick the clock away and be able to walk out with a close victory.
Yeah, they're going to have to get their wins early and late.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to be opportunistic. They probably got to beat either Nebraska or Purdue for sure. And then you get Michigan State maybe, and then maybe Northwestern. There's a path to win 6 or 7 games for sure.
Yep, for sure.
But those first 2 games, I look at them, Kansas and at Nebraska, they got to win at least one of those games.
Yeah.
You cannot lose both of those games and be 2-2 going into that gauntlet that they're going to have.
Well, and it's going to be really tough against Nebraska and that run defense.
Yes, that is the thing. Nebraska's run defense they're so strong up front, and that's going to be Illinois' strength.
Exactly. So that's going to be tough. They're going to have to throw the ball there, and hopefully Altmaier is the one who's able to get it together at that time, and he's more consistent than last year because they're going to need him to throw. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Forgot to mention they have a new kicker in David Plano, who's a top 5 kicker in the nation out of high school by 24/7 Sports rankings.
Oh,
And then Hugh Robertson returns at punter after his best year last year. So
all
they
right.
should be competent on special teams at least.
Great. They've got potential. They really do. It's going
Yes.
to be exciting and interesting to see how it goes. And you know how well it's going by Bert's expression on his face, how he is on the sideline. If he's
Yeah.
walking around a lot, I mean, he's a big heavy set guy, but like he somehow seems a little lighter, when
Oh
things are
yeah.
okay and he's not worried. He's just real cool, but when he does not move and there is just one single look on his face the whole
He
entire
does
time.
do the 1,000-yard stare.
Oh yeah, he's off a
When things
million
aren't
miles
going
away.
well.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, he's not. I don't think he's like mentally present at all. He's gone somewhere else, and he's
Yep.
there. He's not a happy camper. So
No.
but
Certainly not.
yeah. And then he generally comes out and says something wild, in the press conference. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it'll be win or lose. It's going to be fascinating to watch Illinois this year.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially because it could set up, if it doesn't go well, it could be setting up a hot seat year next year.
Yep.
And you don't want to have a hot seat year. You want to avoid that if you can.
No. And in a way, it'd be too bad, like I know there was a lot of hype coming up with his return to the Big Ten, a lot of high expectations at Illinois. This was going to be the guy who was going to get him back to being consistently good. And he has shown, there's been some bright spots there, but like we said,
Yeah, they won 9 games in 2022.
yeah, but even good coaches in certain programs like Illinois, it's tough. Like you said, it's a basketball school and it just hasn't been their emphasis. But this, we've talked about these programs. If they want to compete in the Big Ten, you got to invest. And so I hope they don't get rid of him. I think he deserves, at least another year for sure.
He'll get another year. I don't think
Yeah.
he's going to get fired after a bad year this year. I'm just saying,
No.
if he misses a bowl again,
Yeah.
then next year could be a prove it year.
Yeah, but he definitely deserves some more time, and
Yes.
and I think he's got more of his guys on this team too, so he should, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. All right, John, should we talk about our beloved Golden Gophers? And you didn't think I would let you be the only one wearing gear.
There you go.
So here we are.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, but it's a multiple hat show for me. Multiple hat show.
It's like our version
That's how
of
we're serious.
Yes, this is it's kind of like a Lee Corso game day thing in a way, but not as cheesy maybe.
Only I'm not picking a winner. I'm just talking about we're all winners because it's the preseason.
That's right.
Everyone's a winner until the ball is kicked off.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's good, man. I love it. And it's, you got the gold going, I got the maroon. It's perfect.
Absolutely. All right, our contributors for Minnesota, we've got 3 of them. We have at Randomly Adams or Random Adams. So thank you for your contributions. We have at Goldie's Burner, which is such a good name.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Goldman H. Gopher.
Love it.
Thank you, Goldman H. Gopher. And then we have at Soda Sports Fan 1, and that's Dylan.
Excellent.
So we thank you guys. Thank you to all our contributors tonight.
Yes.
We have so many for this show. This is the most we've had for a single show, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we love it.
All right. So I'm going to do the same thing, sort of what I did with IU, since we have multiple contributors. That first question, I'll give everybody's responses, and then I'll probably kind of just jump around a little bit. So now that you've seen how your team did in the portal, how spring went, what is your expectation for this season? What's your projected record for 2024? Goldie's Burner said that Minnesota grabbed 13 transfers in the portal and was ranked 35th in the country as a portal class by 24/7 Sports. A few are worth being pretty excited about, starting with new signal caller Max Brosmer as a 2023 FCS All-American, and he becomes Minnesota's starter for the year. Should fill the gap nicely for quarterbacks on the depth chart and provide some much-needed firepower to what was an anemic passing offense last year. And then highly touted defensive end and hometown guy Jackson Howard came in as a guy that Fleck missed in recruiting his first year, but after a year at LSU, he comes home. So he's a guy, he's not going to start this year probably, but he could contribute, and he's a high ceiling guy. So he could be a guy who comes in and makes big plays potentially.
Yeah.
Says he's pretty happy with the portal and how it went, and thought that, Minnesota filled back well at different positions. Random Adam says, according to Vegas, the Gophers are at 5.5. He said that seems low. It should be 6.5. Schedule's tougher with Michigan and Penn State, yet he doesn't think UCLA or USC are ready to compete in the Big Ten. Says 7 or 8 wins for the season. And Dylan says, I expect a high level of competition from PJ Fleck and company between recruiting and minimal transfer portal loss, combined with major transfer portal additions like Brosmer, with a more mature offensive line and defensive line and secondary, has high hopes. His projected record for the Gophers in the 24-25 season is 9-3. Says the biased fan in him says 10-2. But thinks wins against UNC, Rhode Island, Nevada, Iowa, UCLA, Maryland, Illinois, Rutgers, and either Penn State or Wisconsin. So high hopes there for sure. All right. Rank the following position groups and how strong you think they are comparatively. Goldie's Burner said special teams, RB, DL, OL, QB, tight end, wide receiver, linebacker, secondary. Dylan said defensive line, linebackers, O-line, running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight end, secondary, then special teams. And Random Adam said O-line, D-line, running back, wide receiver, linebacker, secondary, special teams, tight ends, and then QB, just because Brosmer is somewhat unknown because he hasn't played on this level yet.
Okay.
Which players are the best for each position group? Got guys like Brosmer, Darius Taylor, Daniel Jackson, Jamison Gears, Ariante Ursary, Ja Joyner, Cody Lindenberg, Justin Wally, Dragon Kesich, Danny Strigow, and Nick Callerup, Jack Henderson. So those are some of the guys who you're going to see make a big, and I would agree with that. Those are some guys who are going to make a big difference for the Golden Gophers this year. And then Goldie's Burner included a breakdown of all these players. And I don't have time to go in depth on all these. We will talk about them at the end. And I appreciate the manifesto-like nature of your contribution to the podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Which players are going to play this fall are unproven or proven to be questionable? On the offensive side, said Elijah Spencer at wide receiver. He's a guy who was an all-conference USA performer a couple of years ago, but didn't get going last year. So he's a guy who they want to step up and play well. On defense, he threw out Coy Parrish. I thought that was interesting. Random Adams had Brosmer, Daniels, Kelly, probably Parrish as well, and then Brosmer and Lindenberg. So yeah, I would agree that those are, with Lindenberg, it's just a matter of can he stay healthy, and Brosmer, can he get up to this level? Coy Parrish is a young guy who might play some situationally, who's a big-time recruit for the Gophers. All right, how'd the transfer portal go? Which transfer portal players will make the biggest impact this season? We kind of talked about a bunch of them there, so we can probably skip past that. Also throw in C.A. Bangura and Marcus Majors and Ethan Robinson.
Yeah.
At the first two at running back and Robinson at cornerback. So we'll do that, and then we'll move on to the next question. Which members of the coaching staff are in prove-it mode this year? Will these coaches be fired if things don't go well for their position groups? And they agree that Greg Harbaugh, the offensive coordinator, is the guy everyone agrees on. And then randomly Adams also mentions Matt Simon. Talks about how the offense was snake bit in 2023 and that the passing game has been inconsistent, and thinks as a wide receiver coach, he needs to step up a little bit. But other than that, they think Greg Harbaugh, I think that's probably fair. Harbaugh is, a guy who is in his second year, and they need to see him. I thought he showed progress last year, but we need to see even more progress this year for sure. All right, number 7, how do you feel about your head coach heading into 2024? Dylan says, going into 2024 and every year, I love PJ Fleck. As a coach, I'm a big believer in building a culture and success following that. I am a PJ Fleck guy until I die, he says. Love that enthusiasm and passion. Randomly, Adam says Fleck is the best Gopher coach in the modern era. And Goldie's Burner says, other than Harbaugh, this is a bit of a prove-it year for Fleck as well, as he had a 5-7 record 7 years into a tenure. It happens when you're a developmental program. But that said, wants to see get back on track this year. And doesn't want to, and says won't be stoked if we run the ball 40 times a game again. I don't think that's going to happen this year, but we've said that before.
Yes, I hope not.
So I really don't think that's going to happen this year, but we can't say for sure it won't happen because it is a PJ Fleck team. And if the passing game doesn't work, PJ Fleck will just run the ball.
Yep.
But with Max Brosmer, with Daniel Jackson back, with the offensive line, with some of the guys at receiver, Elijah Spencer, with Lemeki Brockington back healthy, with Christian Driver coming in from Penn State. Yep. Sorry, I'm getting to the thoughts already. Look at me. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, let's finish out the questions. Which groups can you least afford injury? Talked about running backs, linebackers, and secondary. Mm-hmm. So I would agree that those are some spots where we could use to have some good health for once. How well is your team set up for the short and long term in the Big Ten? There's some pretty good optimism set up short and long term. Talks about, Fleck's renewed energy and the stability he's brought to the program. He's the third longest tenured coach in the Big Ten, 20th amongst all FBS teams. Mark Coyle's been around a long time too and provides a lot of value as the athletic director. So I would agree with all that. I think that that it's in a very positive spot as long as they continue to have that buy-in and that synergy with the AD and the school and the coach.
Yep.
Randomly Adams thinks we can be a top 25 team sooner than later and get back into that top 25. All right. A lot of teams who are, let's see, what will constitute a successful season? How well you're set up for that? Goldie's Burner basically says they want to see improvement in health and efficiency. I would agree. Minnesota, we'll talk about it, but Minnesota had a bajillion injuries last year. Yeah. And we obviously don't want to see that happen again. How that translates into wins, they're not sure, but he thinks 7 wins is very attainable. Randomly Adams has 7 or 8 wins, and that said that'd be a positive Big Ten record with and a successful season this year. That it's tough schedule with Michigan and Penn State, but this is quietly a talented team. Mm-hmm. And Dylan says, I think a successful season in 24-25 is consistent above average play from the offense, defense, and average play on special teams. Truly, special teams can't get worse than last season. Dylan, I'm with you. Outside of Dragan Kesic.
I was going to say, there's one.
Outside of Dragan Kesic, who was amazing as a place kicker. But yes, on the kicking game, in the return game, and in the punting game, it was pretty rough.
You mean just?
I agree with you there.
There's a return game. They don't just catch.
There are teams, John, who return kicks and punts. It's a thing that happens in college football. I know.
No.
I know. It's crazy.
Like, I thought everyone else was just cheating. I thought you're supposed to just catch it and stand there and that's it.
Yeah, just fair catch it. That's supposed to be what you do. Yeah, there are teams that try to actually make plays on special teams outside of field goals.
Wow.
I know.
Amazing.
It's wild.
We should try that.
We'll talk about it with the new special teams coach.
Excellent.
All right. Thoughts? John, 6-7 was the worst year of the PJ Fleck era. If you discount the COVID year in his first year, he had won 11, 9-9 games in consecutive non-COVID seasons before that. But last year, the team was decimated by injuries, struggled with QB wide receiver play outside of star wide receiver Daniel Jackson, who was fantastic. Mm-hmm. So your thoughts, why don't we start with the offense and talk about the offense a little bit, and then we can move to defense.
Well, with the offense, I'm going to let you take off on this, but I'll just kind of hit some of the highlights here. Obviously running back, let me just start with what everybody is already hyping up, and rightfully so. Darius Taylor is a star already. He barely played last season and is a freaking star.
In 5 games, he had 800 yards rushing.
Yeah. So anyone who isn't aware of who this person is, do a little research and be prepared. He looks bigger. He looks stronger. I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do this season. And depth at running back. I mean, we saw some amazing things. You did in person from Marcus Major. You saw some. We've seen some good things come from obviously Jordan Newman in the past. We've got Sia Bangura, who has looked good. So I think, obviously after the last year and obviously prior years to that, PJ has re-upped and made sure we have a lot of depth at the running back position with some solid running backs. I think it's probably the deepest I've ever seen it, really, which is saying something because PJ always has a pair spare and what he likes and then some air. So there's always three.
The pair, the spare, and air.
Yeah. So I feel really good about the running back room. And our offensive line, I think, has a ton of experience. I feel really good at that. That's a major, major plus. And I see some depth there as well. The only real thing that I have an issue with, and not an issue, I guess, but I'm just not entirely sure what we're going to get as tight end. I feel really good about Max Brosmer. I think Brosmer looks solid. I think there's a lot of upside here with him. He's clearly already shown to be a really great leader. I think he's got a better head on his shoulders, than Ethan did. At least I'm hoping so. We'll see for sure as we play the games. But and there will be a bit of an adjustment, I'm sure, making the jump from FCS to the Big Ten. But I don't think it's going to be as crazy as what some people have projected or maybe are expecting.
No, and he was here for spring ball. And
Yeah.
so he got a lot of that adjustment out of the way in spring ball to the speed of the game and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the reports are, and what I saw when I saw practice is that he was crazy accurate so far this fall.
And I just, obviously without, we don't need to go in depth about Daniel Jackson, but I'm expecting Lemeki Brockington, if he can stay healthy, to be that second receiver, him and Elijah Spencer, one or the other, to kind of end up being more electric. Cause I've seen Lemeki, we both have seen Lemeki be amazing when he's healthy.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot going on the offensive side of the ball, man. I think there's a lot to be positive about and excited about. I think yes, this is going to sound like a homer take, and I'm not going to say that there isn't bias. Obviously, I'm a Gopher fan, but I think it is massively underrated.
Yes.
Now, am I saying massively underrated as this is like a Big Ten championship caliber team? No, not necessarily. That's not what I'm saying here. But I think to expect 5.5 wins and a lot of people taking the under on that is ridiculous.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Is crazy to me because Minnesota has 4 starters back on the offensive line, headlined by all Big Ten left tackle Ariante Ursary, who's going to be a high round pick in next year's NFL draft.
Yep.
And it looks like Minnesota has good competition at that other right tackle spot. So I feel like they're going to feel good about whoever ends up winning the job there. And they might play a couple guys at right tackle until in the early season until one guy seizes the job. But that's the only spot on the offensive line. Every other spot is locked down by returning really good production. And in Ariante Ursary case, man, Ariante Ursary is not just one of the best players in the Big Ten. He's one of the best linemen that's ever played for Minnesota.
Yep.
Ever.
Yep.
And they've had some good ones.
Yep. And you got to understand like how good Minnesota has been at developing those positions. Like,
yes.
So this is
Brian Callahan at offensive line coach has been such a force, and he has developed guys incredibly well throughout his career. And I think we're going to see that. I think this is going to be one of his better offensive lines. And with, you've got Darius Taylor, and then you look at, C.A. Bangura is a good, I think, Big Ten level back. He's a decent player from the transfer from Ohio. He looked good in spring ball. He catches the ball really well. He's got good quickness. He runs hard, stuff like that. But Marcus Majors, man, the transfer from Oklahoma, Marcus Majors, I mean, that guy is special. He did some things in open practice that made your jaw absolutely drop to the floor. At one point, one guy next to me exclaimed, "He's like a video game," and shouted it out. And we were all turned to him. We're like, yeah, dude, he really is. Because he had just had a spin move into a juke. He did a full spin move around one guy into a juke around 2 other guys. And I was like, so that running game is going to be fantastic. And it's going to be how good is the passing game. Now, Daniel Jackson is one of the best receivers in the Big Ten. No question.
Yeah.
So, he had over 800 yards last year, even with Ethan Kaliakmanis is throwing in the ball, which is rough. And some of those catches he made, he shouldn't have been able to make. They were incredible catches.
Yeah.
So having him back, and like you said, Le'Meke Brockington being healthy, Christian Driver and Elijah Spencer being ready to potentially produce. If those guys, that's the question mark on the offense.
Yeah.
Will those other receiving threats outside of Daniel Jackson produce this year? Will they stay healthy and produce? Because if they do get that production that we think they're going to get, this is going to be a really balanced, prolific offense this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other great thing about having Marcus Majors there is we've already you've seen how good Darius is. And to have someone there who is also pushing him to be better is going to make him even that much more dangerous. So, and obviously Marcus Majors himself, and they're going to be doing that for each other. So,
I think Minnesota, I think that tandem they have is definitely a top 5 running back tandem in the Big Ten. And that's with Ohio State, with Penn State, with Oregon, right up there with those teams. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. I think, by the end of the season, I would not be surprised to see, Darius Taylor in contention for being, the first team Big Ten running back, and I know he's among some very, very, very talented running backs, but I could see him up there in contention for something like that. So, offensively, I think we've covered it. I feel really good about it. The only thing I guess that makes me nervous is if Max Brosmer goes down.
Yeah. If that happens, we're looking at a true frosh quarterback. We're in trouble.
Yeah.
But how many Big Ten teams can survive losing their starting quarterback? I count Oregon, Ohio State, and who else?
What? Maybe Penn State? Maybe? I don't know.
Maybe.
Because Prabula is pretty good.
Yeah, maybe they'd be okay.
Penn State? Yeah,
but there are not a lot of in the portal era depth at quarterback is, unless you have a bajillion dollars to spend like Ohio State and Oregon, depth at quarterback is non-existent. It's not going to be a thing.
That's true. Yeah.
So I do think if Brosmer goes down, the Gophers are in trouble. But I think if most Big Ten teams starting quarterback goes down, they're in big trouble.
That's true. Yeah, fair.
Defense, let's go there. Minnesota had a bajillion injuries on defense last year, and a lot of youth played, which doomed them to an average performance after being a top 10 unit nationally for a couple years in a row before that. So new defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman comes over from Rutgers and runs the exact same scheme as departing DC Joe Rossi. He's got 8 starters back and a ton of returning production. And Heatherman, he comes from that same Rutgers, Minnesota incestuous coaching tree. So, and he was also under Kurt Signetti at James Madison, was the FCS assistant coach of the year. Defensive coach of the year, I believe. Assistant defensive coach of the year. So he, is a really accomplished guy, and he inherits a pretty good group. He's got Cody Lindenberg back. Cody Lindenberg, again, was like Darius Taylor last year. He was hurt most of the year, but when he was healthy, he's an NFL talent.
Absolutely.
He's a sideline-to-sideline menace. So if he's healthy this year, then that makes a big difference. And then you've got Devin Williams, Maverick Baranowski at linebacker. Those guys played a lot last year because Lindenberg was hurt, and they got a lot better as the year went on.
Yep.
So they're fighting out to see who's going to start next to Lindenberg in that 4-2-5 base defense. Nickelback Jack Henderson returns after a huge year last year. The Gophers will miss safety Tyler Nubin.
Yes.
There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But they have an elite tandem of cornerbacks in Justin Wally and transfer Ethan Robinson. I think those guys will shoulder the weight as the Gophers adjust to life without Nubin at safety in those first few games of the year. Gophers will be elite at DN with Ja Joyner and Danny Strigow, while Jalen Logan Redding, Devin Eastern will man things inside, and budding star Anthony Smith will pass rush both from D tackle and defensive end positions. Do the Gophers? So here's my big questions. Assuming they can stay relatively healthy, do the Gophers have a playmaker at defensive tackle, or just guys who are experienced at defensive tackle? Do they have guys who can make plays, who can rush the passer coming up the middle and not depend? Because the Gophers have really good defensive ends.
Yes.
So those guys are going to excel. But do they have a playmaker on the inside? When those defensive ends are getting double teamed, can you win inside and get pressure? Can you stop the run inside? because that is what the Gophers were missing at times last year. And I think because they're so old and experienced that they should be better this year. And Jalen Logan Redding moving from defensive end to defensive tackle should help out a lot. But then it's that, and it's safety. I think Kerry Brown is probably going to be really good at one safety. I think he's shown that he could be a really good player, but is it going to be Aiden Gooseby? Is it going to be Darius Green? Is it going to be the TCU transfer, Jayonte McMillan? Like, who are we talking about at the other safety, and how long does it take them to get settled in? What kind of production can we get at that spot? I've seen Coleman Bryson. Coleman Bryson isn't it. He ain't it. Love the guy. He had a great pick 6 in the bowl game a couple years ago, but he is not a Big Ten quality starting safety. So they brought in some other guys to compete. Gooseby's back in his second year. Maybe he takes a big step forward. But this Minnesota defense, their success this year is going to come down to, I think, what kind of playmaking do they get from the safety positions and the defensive tackle positions? Because they should be pretty good everywhere else.
I feel pretty good, actually, about defensive tackle. I think Devin Eastern is going to be pretty effective this year. I think Anthony Smith could be that one who's really dangerous. He
did some things in practice too, man.
Yeah.
Anthony Smith, he is a problem. He's not going to start, but as a situational pass rusher, he is a problem from D tackle or DN. He's about 6'6", 6'7", so he's got crazy length, and he just kind of, when he glides past guys, it's wild, dude.
Yeah,
they don't have a chance. It seems like sometimes.
So that's the one I'm thinking. If you're going to see some disruption in the middle, I think those two are going to cause some problems. I think Devin Eastern will be like just a solid anchor. I think I can see him just being able to plug up those holes pretty well. But Anthony Smith, I think, is just going to be terrifying all over whenever he's on the field, no matter what. He's a threat. Yep. So, but safety, I'm with you too, man. I'm not entirely sure what to expect there. I think that we're going to be, okay at times. But I do expect that we'll probably get burned off and on, and which is, of course, going to be really frustrating. But I don't think any of our problems or our issues are going to be necessarily strictly due to like the fact that we have a new defensive coordinator. I think there's definitely going to be some changes, some different schemes, some different, maybe a little bit more aggressive on the blitz packages. If Heatherman feels we have the personnel to do so. But I don't see this as like I know there's some out there, maybe some people that listen to the pod that think that Corey Heatherman losing Joe Rossi, which was a big thing. It is not. I'm not trying to downplay that. Losing Joe Rossi is a big loss. He was fantastic. He's a great defensive coordinator.
He's a great coach.
Absolutely. But to think that this is all of a sudden just a total rebuild, renewed scheme and everything like that, it is absolutely not, even in the slightest. So
it's the same scheme.
It's almost exactly.
PJ Fleck didn't bring somebody in to run their scheme. He brought somebody in to run the Minnesota defensive scheme.
Precisely. So I'm not going to blame Heatherman if things go wrong necessarily. I have a good feeling about him. I think he already fits in really well, and I think he's already got the personnel on the field to be able to run his defense effectively. Yeah. Like you said, just safety is my biggest concern as well.
That said, having two really good corners is going to help those safeties as they, whoever wins the job back there, having two really good lockdown corners is going to help them a lot.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I think especially in that first month of the season, as we see them, as they need to get reps just because they aren't used to playing without Tyler Nubin. Mm-hmm. They had to play a certain way with Tyler Nubin. They were always trying to set up Tyler Nubin to get interceptions.
Yep.
Which worked a lot, but also we also got burned a lot because of it.
Yes.
So it kind of gave and take away. And I think this year we'll see us play a lot safer at safety and like take a lot fewer chances and maybe not get burned as much if the guys who win the jobs can step up.
Yep.
It's going to be really interesting because Minnesota has, a very skilled opponent in their first game in the University of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. That's a team that, yes, they don't have Drake May anymore, but they still, are offensively a very good team. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anything else you want to say before? Oh, well, first of all, we got to talk about special teams. And
I was going to say, that's what I was going to say. We got to talk about Bob Ligashevsky.
Bob Ligashevsky. Yes. Yes. So after last year, PJ Fleck finally fired his underperforming special teams coordinator, Rob Winger, who was a good friend of his, but he fired him and he hired Bob Ligashevsky, who's been coaching special teams in the NFL and college for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got a ton of experience. He's done a lot of, he's had a varied and successful career. The question is, can Minnesota get more out of the return game or anything out of the return game? And can Minnesota do a little better punting the ball?
Yeah.
Mark Crawford has been not great. Okay. He has his moments.
Yes,
he's a good directional punter. He's a pretty good directional punter. Yeah. He can't flip the field. He doesn't have that kind of capability.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Minnesota has Big Ten kicker of the year, Dragan Kesic, coming back.
Yeah.
So that's a guy who has won Minnesota plenty of games and is, a guy you want the Serbian Hammer is a guy you want in your back pocket. Yep. And when he kicks the ball, it just explodes off his foot.
Yeah.
It really does. So it's good to have him in their back pocket. Thoughts, John? Do you think that the new special teams coach makes the return game better, or do you think PJ Fleck won't let him?
I think we're going to have chances. I think from what I hear, Bob Ligashevsky is more aggressive. He wants the returner to return the ball.
Yep.
Dude, I will take 5 yards. I will take 3. I'll take anything. Like, you can get me. I'm tired of seeing, Quentin Redding just standing back there and catching the ball or making stupid mistakes, and costing us, games like that. So I want to see something. It doesn't have to be all the time. Obviously, I understand that's not always, in the cards, but there has to be some attempt at a return game. But I'm not worried at all about our kicking game, other than, the punt game. I think Crawford has gotten to a point where I'm like, I'm okay. I'm not happy.
He's fine.
Fine.
Yes. He's not great. He's fine.
I just want to see a return game of some sort. Anything. Yep. Anything. It doesn't have to be amazing. Just give me something, man. Help the offense out a little bit, dude. Please.
Minnesota has not returned a kick for a touchdown since 2017, and they haven't returned a punt for a touchdown since 2018. So it's been a minute.
Yeah.
It's been since early in the Fleck tenure.
Yeah.
I would like to see somebody other than Quentin Redding.
Same
returner. I don't think he's a terrible player, but I think he's really limited. He's not going to have big returns. I would like to see somebody like a Coy Parrish back there potentially, which he was at times in practice. So, he is a really highly touted safety recruit for the Gophers. The Gophers won in a recruiting battle with Ohio State, where Ryan Day visited him the last week of his recruitment, and he went to Minnesota instead. So there are big things expected of that young man. He was not there in the spring, so he won't be playing a lot on defense, probably situational packages only. But he is a guy who could play right away on special teams, and I would expect to see him there. And the question is, will PJ put a true Frosh back there in the return game, or will he put a senior out there who he knows and trusts? That's the question.
I feel at this point, and maybe this is just me hoping, but like, you have this highly touted recruit who was being recruited by Ohio State.
Yes.
If you don't play him, there's a chance you could lose him. Now
he'll play him. Yeah.
But I want him featured to a degree. At least try. Yeah. You don't have to have him back there every time. Maybe just switch it up every once in a while and give him a shot.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So
yeah, I would love to see Parrish back returning punts and kicks. That'd be great.
Yes.
For sure. All right. Should we play the schedule game?
Let's do it.
So the Gophers start out as they traditionally do on that Thursday, August 29th, against North Carolina, who went 8-5 last year with Drake May, but of course Drake May is not there anymore.
Yep.
And North Carolina is in a 3-man quarterback battle. So they've got Omari and Hampton, who's a great running back. They can really run the ball. The question is, who's going to win the quarterback job, and how good or bad is that quarterback going to be? They really don't know. They don't have any idea how that's going to work out. So that's really interesting to me. Although I will say the North Carolina media seems pretty sure they're going to beat us, even though they don't know anything about our team.
I think I've seen most people picking North Carolina to beat Minnesota, even though we're favored. And I don't know.
We're literally favored by Vegas.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, as we know, nobody does a lot of research into Minnesota generally ever at all. So
Yeah.
not surprised.
So they're just giving them North Carolina, saying Mac Brown's going to win it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that'll be a really competitive game.
Yep.
Minnesota could win or lose. I think if Minnesota wins, that gets them off to a really good schedule because their next two games are against Rhode Island, who went 6-5 last year, and Nevada, who went 2-10 last year. So Minnesota should win those games for sure. So if Minnesota beats North Carolina, then they should be 3-0 at the end of September when they start out Big Ten play against Iowa, playing for Floyd of Rosedale, which, of course, the Gophers won in a stunner last year. That's a big deal, John. I think this schedule, so much of it comes down to the North Carolina game and the Iowa game.
Yeah.
I think if Minnesota could be 4-0 and ranked, because Iowa's going to be ranked to start the year.
Yeah.
So if Minnesota's 4-0 and they beat Iowa and they beat UNC, they're probably going to be ranked. And for the Gophers, for that might be a shock for a lot of the nation who has been told that Minnesota's not going to be that good.
Mm-hmm.
But that could happen. But on the other hand, maybe the new quarterback has a couple turnovers or something. Maybe there's an adjustment period. Maybe they lose to North Carolina. And then if you lose to North Carolina, then you're looking at Iowa, and you lose to Iowa, you're 2-2.
Yeah.
And if you're 2-2, that makes the schedule a lot harder because we go after that at Michigan and USC at home. So those are two tough games. They'll be underdogs probably in both of them. I think they have a good shot against USC. They're probably not going to the big house and beating Michigan.
Yeah.
Then at UCLA, Maryland at home, at Illinois, at Rutgers. So all of those are very winnable games, that stretch. UCLA, Maryland, Illinois, Rutgers. Minnesota should be favored in all those games.
Mm-hmm.
And should have a really good, probably will be favored in all those games. I can't say 100%, but they will probably be favored in all four of those games. So they should have a good chance to win there and to rack up some wins there because then they end the season Penn State at home and at Wisconsin. So it's a tough schedule. It's not the toughest schedule, but it's a tough schedule. And, especially Penn State, I'd say, and, Penn State, Michigan, USC. USC is going to be great on offense. We don't know what they're going to be like on defense, probably pretty bad. But Penn State and Michigan will be very solid on both sides of the ball. So those will be tough games. Minnesota does pretty well against Penn State, especially at home. But this will be a very good Penn State team.
Yes.
So, and then that Wisconsin game for the Axe, that there could be a lot on the line in that game.
For both teams.
For both teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that could be a thing where they're trying to win 8 or 9 games. Or if the season doesn't go well, it could be a thing where either of those teams is fighting for bowl eligibility.
Yep.
So that's always a monster game. And it's played on Black Friday this year. So it's going to have a huge TV audience.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be a national showcase game for both those programs. John, here's what I'm coming to with the Gophers. There is a disconnect between what the local media and what the Big Ten network media thinks and what the national media thinks.
Yes.
The national media has got the Gophers picked to be 12th in the Big Ten out of 18 and to go 6-6.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the national media is picking the Gophers to do. Whereas I think the Big Ten network and some of the other media that's local has been a lot more positive. And I think Minnesota fans think this is a really good team.
Yeah.
Not a team that's going to win the conference, not a team that's going to probably go to the big house and beat Michigan or anything, but a team that could win 7, 8, 9 games, depending on how things shake out.
Yep.
And we're going to find out. We're going to find out who was right and who was wrong.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people rolling their eyes at us right now. I could probably name who they are, their Twitter handles anyways. But the thing is it's really not that crazy. It's not, if you do the research, it's there, and then you can make that argument for any team. Of course, I get it. But this team could potentially, there's a road to 9 wins. There really is.
Yes. I'm not predicting it.
No, me neither.
But it's possible.
Yes, I'm not either, by the way. So, don't tweet at me right now. I know you're ready to. But
Yeah.
I do think that I don't think 7 is crazy at all. I think it's absolutely a bowling team. I don't see why we shouldn't be going 6-6. I think it's crazy to think that we're not. Personally,
I think
unless
7 or 8 is the most likely thing to happen.
that's where I'm at. That's where I'm sitting as well. Maybe even being a little bit more reserved and saying 7 wins. At this
Yeah.
point in time would probably what I would say.
If I had to pick today, gun to
Yes,
my head, I would probably say 7 wins. Yeah.
same.
But I also think that there's a world where Max Brosmer is better than people think and
Yep,
is as good as he was at the not saying he's as dominant as he was at the FCS level, but that he's the same kind of player we saw dominate the FCS level.
yep.
And if he steps up, if this passing game is improved and the Gophers get decent play at safety, this could be a really dangerous team.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there are games on that schedule that I know we're not going to be favored in, but I think are absolutely winnable. And I frankly do think that USC is one that we could upset, and people would not see that coming or expect that. I know that they're going to score points, but I'm also not entirely sold that USC's offensive line is going to be able to protect um, their quarterback from
Yep.
from getting pressured.
And
Or
Miller Moss isn't Caleb Williams. He can't run
Yep.
around and make all and get away from the defense just because he's a freak.
Yep. I think our defensive ends are so elite that they're
Yes.
going to cause USC a lot of problems in the backfield.
I do. I think USC, when I look at Wisconsin and Minnesota, I think USC is going to have a lot more problem with those teams than they think they are.
Yeah, because they're going to want to go deep. They're going to want to have the highlight reel passes, and they might be forced to just dink and dunk all over the field, which they can win. They can still win those
They
kinds
can
of
definitely
games.
win doing that.
But I don't think that's the style of play they want. They
No.
want to go deep. They want like I said, they want these highlight reel plays.
Yes.
But I don't think they're going to be able to do that against a lot of the Big Ten teams with defenses like Minnesota or, like you said, Wisconsin, Nebraska, what have you.
Yes.
So they're going to be forced to change the way they play. And if Minnesota can do that, I think Minnesota could absolutely beat USC.
Yeah.
Especially because it's at home. And there's other teams too, obviously, on the schedule. But that's where I'm at. I agree. I think North Carolina, frankly, I actually have that as the most important game.
Yes.
Because that's going to set the
most
tone.
important game of the year.
Yep.
That I would say that, and then Iowa.
Yes. And of course, I know a lot of people would put Iowa above that, which I get why.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense. But for this season in particular, it has to start with North Carolina. And if that goes well, I'll feel pretty darn good about it. But if not, it could be a tough road.
Yeah. We're going to find out. The thing is, with North Carolina and Iowa, we're going to know by the end of September how good Minnesota is.
Absolutely.
Because either they're going to be 4-0 or they're going to be 2-2. And I don't think they're going to be in between. Like, I don't think they're going to be 3-1.
Yeah.
I don't. I think they're going to be 2-2 or they're going to be 4-0.
Yep, I'm with you. Fortunately, Iowa tends to start out slow. So
yes, that is the Minnesota usually plays Iowa when Kirk Ferentz has the team rounded into form in November and they're clicking on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa's a slow starter. So yes, getting Iowa in September is a break for the Gophers. There's no question about that. Yep. And of course they're at home this year, which, makes it even better.
Yep, exactly. I got high hopes, man. Like we said, 7 wins is excellent in the new Big Ten. So I can see 7-8 wins with this team. And I don't think that sounds crazy. I know there's others out there who obviously will disagree with me. But I just think you're wrong. And I'm going to say it.
And you know what? If we're wrong, we'll be the first ones to tell you we were wrong.
Yes, we will.
And say, hey, we thought the Gophers were better than they were, and this is the way it works.
That's it. That's college football, man. That's how it goes.
Yeah. All right, John. This is our longest YouTube podcast to date.
Well, not surprising. We, covering Minnesota and all, but this is good.
Shocking.
This is great.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. So thank you if you're still rocking with us an hour and 49 minutes into an hour and 49 minutes into this podcast. You are a real one.
Yes.
So thank you for that, John. And please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Should have said that up front, but I'll say it now. Please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Helps us grow the channel and find other viewers.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of our contributors. We really appreciate it.
Yes,
honestly,
thank you.
It's incredible. You give us so much more than what we what we could possibly ask for. So, but if you want to find us, obviously you got us here right on YouTube. You can find us here on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike here at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can also email us with any questions, any thoughts, what have you. We Live for Saturday, b1g@gmail.com.
All right. Thanks so much. We will see you next week with 3 more teams to preview for this upcoming Big Ten season. John, we only have 2 preview episodes left, and then it's football time.
Yes. Awesome.
Football
it's so
time.
exciting.
Yes. All right.
It's amazing.
All right. See you next time, everybody.
Have a good one.